Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Katan, in the news, we're going to talk about some severe flooding here in the United States from Louisiana all the way to West Virginia. We'll have those details. Also, we have another Houthi attack, the Iranian-backed rebels. This time they attacked a UK tanker. So in the United States is not taking that real well. And we're also going to talk about the International Court of Justice entertaining the idea of genocide against Israel, saying that Israel committed genocide in Gaza. We're going to look also at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's response to such claims. But first, we've talked recently about the large numbers of migrants attempting to cross from Mexico into the United States, and the latest update is that the migration in December reached an all-time high of 302,000 people. Now, this number comes from U.S. Customs and Border Protection and includes 120,000 parents and children.
But since 2024 began, illegal crossings have dropped by 50%. Two factors are thought to be the reason for this drastic drop in immigrants crossing the border. The first, U.S. officials say, is attributed to a heightened Mexican police force on the opposite side of the Rio Grande River. The second reason is that the holiday season has ended.
Well, we've all heard of the doomsday clock, and the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have once again set the doomsday clock to 90 seconds before midnight. Now, this is the closest the clock has been set to what some call Armageddon, or the annihilation of the entire world. Now, the doomsday clock was created back in 1947 to reflect the tensions taking place in the onset of the Cold War. The doomsday clock is meant to spark discussion that there is a need to make changes in the world, or destruction is imminent.
Well, Rachel Bronson, the CEO for the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, announced, quote, "We once again set the doomsday clock to express a continuing and unprecedented level of risk," end quote. Well, Herb Lin from Stanford University also commented saying, quote, "That's really bad, because the threat multiplier effect means that we're not going to be able to solve other hard problems like nuclear war and climate change. So that's really tough," end quote.
Well, one reason the group decided to maintain the same 90 seconds to midnight as last year was due to the U.S. increasing its nuclear arsenal, which is the first in decades. Now, the U.S. says it is simply trying to keep up with other nuclear countries who have been expanding their weapons, like Russia and China.
Well, from nuclear threats to climate change, the threat to everyday life never seems to end. Torrential rains have been hitting the United States hard, putting millions of people under flood watch and causing dangerous situations for everyone involved. Please take a look at this next video.
But we begin tonight with severe weather. Nearly 26 million people are under flood watches from Louisiana to West Virginia, with more rain expected in the days ahead. Parts of the South are already underwater tonight after days of torrential rains, with more than a foot on the ground in parts of Texas and several inches in Louisiana. CBS's Janet Shamlian reports tonight from Conroe, Texas, where officials have declared a disaster due to the dangerous flooding.
A city submerged, cars plowing through floodwater in Mandeville, Louisiana, north of New Orleans. This is what 6 inches of rain in less than 24 hours looks like. A first responder helping a passenger to safety. In Texas, the storm is over, but the emergency is ongoing.
Authorities have been on the scene here for the past day, taking these boats out and bringing people to safety. The water came up very quickly. You can see a car submerged there in the background. Just the distance between me and the car, there's 8 feet of standing water.
Emergency crews use these boats to rescue people from more than a dozen homes,
Thank you for your help. Appreciate it.
including a few pets. First responders say one homeowner wouldn't leave until it was almost too late.
There's an individual who called 911. He couldn't get out of his house.
5 people had to be rescued after trying to drive through the fast-flowing water. Warnings not to drive on flooded roads are frequently ignored.
If you do end up in a situation where your vehicle is taking on water, you need to get yourself and your passengers to higher ground as quickly as you possibly can.
Experts say a sinking car may float on the water's surface for up to 3 minutes, but you only have 1 minute to exit safely. Remember the acronym SWOC. Seatbelts off, windows open or broken, out immediately, and children first.
Flooding is expected to continue here due to runoff. Right now, it's easy to see where this road is washed out, but for a driver at night, visibility drops and the danger increases.
Well, Ketan, 8 feet is a lot of standing water. Now, I've never heard of the SWOC acronym, but we did hear turn around, don't drown, don't try driving through such deep water.
That's right.
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been covering several stories for us, including an execution in Alabama. This was a new style of execution that some had some issues with. Larry, what do you have for us?
The systematically guilty condemning the guilty is prompting international outrage once more as a man was put to death recently with an experimental procedure in Alabama. The means of execution was nitrogen gas, which took the man's life after approximately 8 minutes of suffering. The U.S. Supreme Court allowed the execution to move forward, but Justice Sonia Sotomayor followed with the dissenting opinion stating that this court yet again permits Alabama to experiment with a human life. Despite prominent disapproval, Alabama is apparently pleased with the outcome and is looking to utilize the method in the execution of 43 other inmates. The execution of force to combat force is proven to be an ineffective method for the U.S. and UK. The Yemenis arm of the Axis launched a retaliatory strike against a British oil tanker this week, leaving it ablaze. Both the U.S. and France responded to the attack by dispatching vessels to the Gulf of Aden to lend assistance. The U.S. and UK, shouted by several other nations, have been involved in an escalating tit-for-tat with the Axis of Middle East nations that have aligned to resist them. The stated objective of the American and British coalition is to safeguard commercial interests in the Gulf while preventing a wider war throughout the Euphrates, but analysts see them failing at both and are recommending harsher action. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Ketan Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, well, that's definitely going to, cause a big stir there with that Houthi attack on that British tanker. The Allies are definitely have their eyes open there, and there's always some form of retaliation that takes place as a result of that. Well, the International Court of Justice has presented its interim ruling in a case brought by South Africa. The South African country is accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. The court has ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent such genocide. Several of the other rulings by the court orders Israel to allow humanitarian assistance for Gaza, prevent and punish incitement of genocide, and recognize Palestinians' right to be protected from acts of genocide.
Well, the courts also ordered Israel to submit a report to the court outlining how it has worked to implement these measures within a month. Now, to note, the ICJ doesn't have any way to push these measures, and Israel called the allegations false and an anti-Semitic ruling. Now, many others of the international community are disappointed as the measures don't go far enough, such as demanding a ceasefire, and something that many have called for months now.
Well, since the Israel incursion into the Gaza Strip, more than 26,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of them civilians. Now, regarding the ICJ and their ruling, this was just a preliminary ruling. The final ruling as to whether Israel has committed genocide or not in Gaza could be years down the road. But seeing that the courts didn't demand a ceasefire immediately, that kind of indicates that the bar for genocide is set a lot higher in the court's eyes. But considering that, they did entertain this case that was brought from South Africa shows that the court decided that it had jurisdiction over the matter and that South Africa had the right to make those claims.
And as you mentioned, it usually takes years for that stuff to finally work out, and who knows, the conflict might be over.
And by that time, how many people have lost their lives as a result?
Well, that's an important move by the court, even though it doesn't have the teeth, so to speak, to back up its judgments. It does show that the international community has its eyes on Israel.
Well, if you're wondering what the Prime Minister of Israel thinks about the ICJ's ruling to investigate the allegations that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, well, you don't have to wonder for long, because our next video is going to show you Netanyahu's reaction to the International Court's ruling. Please listen closely.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
Well, the Prime Minister there standing strong, saying Israel had every right to do what they did and what they continue to do in Gaza. That's right. Well, we do have another video for you on military drills picking up in Europe as the war in Ukraine rages on. Now, what is Russia preparing for, and is Europe possibly the hotspot for the next nuclear war? Take a look at this video.
As the war in Ukraine continues, NATO has kicked off its largest military drills all across Eastern Europe. Russia, on the other hand, is busy training its forces for a nuclear explosion as it tests an advanced simulator. Why is NATO conducting its largest military drills right in the face of Russia? Why does Russia need a realistic nuclear explosion simulator? Are these indications that the next nuclear war is likely to take place in Europe? I'm Shivan Chandna. Welcome to Game Plan. NATO forces have kick-started Steadfast Defender 2024, their largest military exercise since 1988. 90,000 troops from the US and allied nations in Europe are taking part. The exercise will continue for over 3 months. Over 50 warships will take part, as will more than 80 fighter jets, helicopters, drones, and at least 1,100 combat vehicles. Some of the major locations of the drills will be Germany, Norway, Romania, and there will be keen focus on the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, all of which border Russian territory. Through these drills, NATO plans to show Russia just how fast it can deploy its advanced multinational land, air, maritime, and special operations forces to Poland on the alliance's eastern flank. Now, Poland, of course, borders Russia's close ally, Belarus, and Russia has not taken well to these plans, calling it an irrevocable return to Cold War schemes. Just days after NATO's largest drills were announced, Russia's state media released its latest patent, a realistic nuclear explosion simulator. The simulator is for ground-based nuclear explosions that will help prepare Russian soldiers for combat operations. It will help in preparing Russia's radiation, chemical, biological, ground reconnaissance forces personnel in how to determine the parameters and epicenter of a nuclear explosion. To explain why the situation is so volatile, I want to show you US nuclear weapons storage sites in Europe. along with US ally nations which possess nukes of their own. And now here's a look at Russia's nuclear weapons storage sites. But along with these sites, Russia also positioned its nukes in Belarus last year. And do not forget that Kaliningrad in NATO's underbelly, where Russia had allegedly positioned its nuclear assets as well. Now, this is how close NATO and Russia have their nuclear assets placed, and Europe is sandwiched in the middle. To remind you, Russia had warned in 2022 that if Finland and Sweden applied to join NATO, Russia would have to restore the nuclear balance in the Baltics. Cut to 2024, Finland has already become a NATO member state, and Sweden is just one step away from becoming one. Now, here's where things get worse. Sweden, which is not yet a part of NATO, will also take part in NATO's Steadfast Defender drills, which will surely anger Russia more. Belarus and Kaliningrad, in the midst of Eastern Europe, are Russia's nuclear-armed strategic spots. All these factors are making Europe the next possible theater for a nuclear war. All these factors are making Europe the next possible theater for a nuclear war. All these factors are making Europe the next possible theater for a nuclear war.
Well, those exercises and all that firepower is definitely not bringing the nations closer to peace, but inciting greater hostilities and tensions against one another. Well, this last video shows a meeting between the Catholic Church and Orthodox Church leaders who just celebrated a 20-year anniversary of the International Joint Commission for Theological Dialogue between Catholics and the Orthodox. Let's take a look at this next video to see what the Pope had to say.
Pope Francis met with the members of the International Joint Commission for Theological Dialogue between Catholics and Orthodox. This commission has just celebrated its 20-year anniversary.
Che questo anniversario sia allora l'occasione per lodare Dio per il percorso compiuto, facendo memoria grata di quanti vi hanno contribuito attraverso la competenza teologica e la preghiera, e possa pure rinnovare la convinzione che la piena comunione tra le nostre chiese non solo è possibile, ma urgente e necessaria perché il mondo creda.
Over the past year, the Pope has had several meetings with Orthodox leaders. One of the most memorable was the visit of Tawadros II of the Coptic Church, with whom he celebrated the 50th anniversary of the meeting between their predecessors.
Sua Santità Tawadros è venuto a trovarmi per la prima volta il 10 maggio di 10 anni fa, pochi mesi dopo la sua e la mia elezione, e ha proposto di celebrare ogni 10 maggio la giornata dell'amicizia copto-cattolica, che da quel tempo celebriamo ogni anno. Ci chiamiamo al telefono, ci diamo saluti e rimaniamo buoni fratelli. Non abbiamo litigato.
Also visiting the Pope in 2023 was the leaders of the Indian Orthodox Church.
Thank you very much.
And the Syrian Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch. Many of them are expected to participate in the 2025 gathering that will commemorate the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea. Many of them are expected to participate in the 2025 gathering that will commemorate the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea. Many of them are expected to participate in the 2025 gathering that will commemorate the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea.
Interesting comment at the end there, Katan, that they're going to, next year, they're going to celebrate the 1700-year anniversary of the Council of Nicaea back in 325. And we know, we've heard a lot about that. Yeshua Hawkins has wrote a lot about that Council of Nicaea and how that was the time where they actually came up with the name, and you heard that right, came up with the name Jesus Christ, as they picked two gods, put them together, so try to unite all the people to worship one God.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if they're going to be dealing with the same frustrations that Constantine had to deal with when he brought all those leaders together to try to make a decision that they couldn't come to even after almost a year of balloting. Well, if you'd like to learn more about the history and the prophecy of the House of Yahweh and what is going to be in everyone's future here very soon, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com. You can go to YeshuaHawkins.com or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, don't forget to go to the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com, and also check out the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere, because up next is another classic sermon from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.